Welcome. In this video, we are going to be looking at solving some absolute value equations. So anytime we have an equation that has an absolute value in the equation, the first thing we're going to do is isolate the absolute value part of the expression using our inverse operations. So just like you solve for a variable, we're just looking at that absolute value portion as the thing that we're trying to get by itself. Once that absolute value part is by itself, we are going to write two equations using the definition of absolute value. So if we remember back to what absolute value is the distance away from zero. So if the absolute value of something is 4, that means that that thing, whatever's inside your absolute value, could be equal to 4, or it could be equal to -4. So our two equations would be whatever's inside the absolute value equals 4, and whatever's inside the absolute values equals -4. So we're going to set one equal to the positive value, what it's already equal to, and the other equal to the negative value. Then we're just going to solve each equation using our inverse operations in reverse order, just like we've been solving all of our equations. Okay, make sure when you're doing this that you check your answers, because sometimes we'll end up with answers that work when we did all of that math, but they don't work back in the original absolute value. Most of the time, what that will look like is that when you plug it back in, we get something like 3 equals -3, which is not true. So make sure that you do check your solutions. Anything that worked the way you solved it but doesn't work when you plug it back in is called an extraneous solution. It's just a solution that came about through the algebra, but doesn't actually work in that initial equation. Okay, let's try some together here. So first one here, remember our first goal is to isolate the absolute value. So we're looking at the thing in the absolute value kind of as a unit itself. You can see on this one, the thing is already all by itself on one side of the equation. So we don't have to do any work to solve, to isolate the absolute value. So now we're just going to move on to step 2 and write two equations using that definition of absolute values. So if x minus 5 is equal to 3, the absolute value of it, that means that the thing inside x minus 5 is either equal to 3, or the thing inside the absolute value could be equal to -3, because the absolute value of -3 is also 3. Then we're going to solve each of those equations just like we've been practicing. So we're subtracting 5. The inverse is adding 5. So we get x equals 8. And here we're subtracting 5. So the inverse is adding 5. Make sure you do that to both sides of your equal sign. -3 plus 5 is 2. So we get two solutions. X is either equal to 8 or 2. Okay, let's check to make sure these work. So if we plug them back in up here, 8 minus 5 is 3. The absolute value of 3 is 3. That one works. 2, plug it back in. 2 minus 5 is -3. The absolute value of -3 is 3. So that one works. So here we ended up with two solutions. X could either equal 8 or 2. Okay, let's try another one here. So again, kind of identify where your absolute value is. It's this thing here. So we're going to get that thing by itself. So right now it's not. So we need to isolate that thing. This -2 is just squished next to it. That is multiplication. The inverse operation of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide both sides by -2. Right? So then here, -2 divided by -2, you get the absolute value of 3x plus 4 equals -10 divided by -2 is +5. Okay. Now our absolute value is by itself. There's nothing outside of the absolute value on the left-hand side of my equation here. So I'm going to set the inside of it, 3x plus 4 equal to 5, or 3x plus 4 could equal -5. Now I have two separate equations I'm going to solve. I'm going to use the same operations on all of them. -4, 3x equals 1, divided by 3, x equals 1/3. Okay, here our process is going to look very similar. 3x equals -9, divided by 3, x equals -3. Okay. So again, let's go back and check our answers and see if they work. If I plug in a third, 3 times a third is 1. If you're not sure about that, check with your calculator. 1 plus 4 is 5. Absolute value of 5 is 5. 5 times negative 2 is 10. Perfect. Plug in negative 3. Negative 3 times 3 is negative 9. Negative 9 plus 4 is negative 5. Absolute value of negative 5 is 5. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. Okay, so they both work. So again, we end up with 2 solutions here. No extraneous solutions. Both of them worked. All right, moving on. Example 3 here. If we have 2x plus 6, the absolute value of that over 4 equals negative 2. So again, our first goal is to get this thing by itself. So right now we're dividing it by 4. So to get rid of that, we multiply by 4. We end up with absolute value of 2x plus 6 equals negative 8. Uh-oh. Red flag right here. Absolute value is a distance. It can never be equal to a negative number. So if you get your absolute value by itself and it's equal to something negative, there is no solution. Okay, you can write no solution, or you can also use this symbol here, which is the empty set, which means no solution. Okay, if that 4 was negative, then we wouldn't have that issue, because when we get our absolute value by itself, negative 2 times negative 4 is positive 8. So even though we started with a negative here, we multiplied by a negative, got to a positive. So we're okay. We could write our 2 equations, 2x plus 6 equals 8, and 2x plus 6 equals negative 8, and continue to solve from there. And last one here. Oh, this one's a little different because we have variables everywhere, but that's okay. Our process is still the same. So we're going to isolate the absolute value. So right now, I don't care that there's an x over here. Our first goal is to get this thing by itself. So it looks like we are doing 2 things here. We're multiplying by negative 1/2 and subtracting 3. I would multiply before I subtract, so I'm going to undo subtraction before I undo multiplication. Make sure you're combining your like terms, right? We can add that 3 to the 1. Can't add that 3 to the x because they're not like terms. Okay. Opposite of multiplying by negative 1/2 is multiplying by negative 2. Keep in mind it's this whole thing multiplied by negative 2. Here that cancels out. We're left with the absolute value of 2x minus 8 equals negative 2 times x plus 4. I think, oh no, I have a negative there. That's okay. We don't know what x is yet, so it may or may not work out in the end. Okay. So once we're here, we're going to follow the same process that we've been doing. My absolute value is by itself. Okay, so I'm going to set this absolute value, the inside, 2x minus 8 equal to what I have here. Or 2x minus 8 equal to the opposite of what I have here. So since I'm multiplying by that negative 2, to make it opposite, I could just do positive 2x plus 4. Really, because we're taking the whole thing times negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 2 is positive 2. We can take care of that opposite. Okay, then we're solving these 2 equations. They're just a little bit more complex equations. So we're going to simplify both sides. 2x minus 8 equals negative 2x minus 8. Okay, and then we add 2x to both sides. Get our variables together. Make sure you're on both sides of your equation here. 4x minus 8 equals negative 8. Add 8. 4x equals 0. Some of us get a little scared there. That's okay. 0 is a number. We can use it. Divide by 4. We get x is 0. That's an acceptable answer. It might work. We'll check in just a minute. Let's solve our other one. Let's distribute our 2 here. We get 2x minus 8 equals 2x plus 8. Subtract 2x, subtract 2x. We get negative 8 equals 8. Uh-oh, not true. That one didn't work. We didn't end up with a solution there. That's totally fine. Let's check 0, see if it works. Okay, I have negative 1/2, and 0 minus 8 is negative 8. Absolute value of that is 8. So -1 half of 8 is -4. Half of 8 is 4. Negative half of 8 is -4. -4 minus 3 is -7. And 0 plus 1. Okay. This did not work. So if it does not work, here we just have no solution. Okay, so we did all that work, didn't get a solution. That's totally fine. That's why we want to check to make sure that our answers do work when we plug them back in. Okay, so make sure that you check your solutions. Make sure that you are paying attention to getting that absolute value by itself. And once you work through that, you check the solutions that you get back in your original problem there. Okay, thank you for watching. That's all we have for today.